welcome everyone to today's webinar, Social Emotional Learning and the Brain. Now, this is the first episode in a three-part series called Growing Great Kids, which is brought to you by Parent Square. And for those that may not know, Parent Square offers an easy-to-use and equitable communication platform that helps streamline and unify all your communication efforts across a school site or a district while still fostering parental engagement. And this entire webinar series is free, and it's a way for us here at Parent Square to give back to our wonderful school communities and leaders that we serve, and we hope that you will thoroughly enjoy it. We are very passionate about this project, and thank you again for taking the time to be here and learn more about social emotional learning, such an important topic. My name is Lynn Sillers. I'm a co-founder here at Parent Square, and I'm also a mom of 3 kids in elementary school. So this topic is certainly very dear to my heart. And today I will be your moderator. And I am very thrilled to have Bob Bourgault with us today, and lucky us to have him join us for the additional 2 upcoming sessions in the series as well, maybe more. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Bob for a good 4 years now, and he comes with a very impressive resume that I just have to share a little bit about. So for starters, he is the executive director of Almond Acres Charter Academy. He has no less than 2 master's degrees, 1 in counseling and guidance, and 1 in curriculum instruction and assessment. He has been in education since 1985 and a public school administrator for over 20 years. And I thought I was busy with my 3 kids, but Bob is a dad of no less than 7. And throughout his career, he's placed great emphasis on social emotional learning. He's been perfecting these techniques to help kids learn to navigate their emotions in a healthy way and grow to be empathetic, responsible citizens who are prepared to interact with the world. Isn't that what we all want? So really, Bob is a very insightful educational leader, and we are so glad to have him with us today. Welcome, Bob.
Hi, Lynn, and hi, everybody. I am so tickled to be here.
Great. And not that we don't want to chat with all of you, but for those that have already discovered the chat box, keep up the good work. But given the large number of participants today, everyone is going to be on mute besides me and Bob. But we want this to be an interactive event. So please submit any comments or questions via the chat tool on your GoToWebinar control panel that you can see on the screen now. And also know that this webinar is being recorded live from California, and we'll send you a copy of the recording as a follow-up for you to look back at, reflect on, and definitely also feel free to share it with others. But now, without further ado, I know you're here for Bob, and I am super excited as well. So we have a good 50-55 minute journey ahead of us with action-packed content for you. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Bob. Take it on.
All right, very good. Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'd like to start with a kind of a personal question for all of us right now. You know, as I'm listening to Lynn introduce all of the different folks coming from different states, I just feel grateful. I'm just so grateful to get to share some of these ideas that I believe are very powerful for parenting and educating. So I want to ask you a question. How do you feel right now? And you know, depending on where you are, if you're at home or at work, you know, maybe you're happy, you're curious, maybe you're silly, or maybe you're cranky, maybe you're overwhelmed or frustrated. But please ask yourself that question right now and try to give that feeling that you have a word. So I shared earlier, mine's grateful. I also feel a little tickled. I feel just anxious and excited about doing this. So can we take that feeling and just kind of put it aside for right now? That's social emotional learning. That's taking the reality of how we feel and wrapping it up in our brain and either using it or putting it aside, especially if it's the cranky one or frustrated one. So there's 30 years of research telling us that every time we try to do our daily life, to challenge ourselves in the episodes of our day and dismiss our social emotional state, it doesn't work. It doesn't help to create productive thinkers. It squelches it. It causes us to be less than the best version of ourselves. So there's plenty of research that tells us that when we work with our emotions, When we understand them and we can identify them, then we can work with them and be much more productive, much more thoughtful, much more intelligent. So that's essentially what this is about. How do we build in strategies in our home and in our school to help kids work with their emotions? Now, I have been in education a long time, but I'm also a dad of a lot of kids. So if I end up with some edubabble, I apologize. Please just comment and let me know if there's a term or something like that that doesn't make sense to you. But let me move to the next slide and talk about something. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Let me go through this agenda quickly. Number one, we want to talk about what does it mean to grow kids, because that's what we do. We're fertilizers. We nurture and grow children as parents and educators. And then I want to look at the brain, and we're going to look at it in a very simple format. I have my cool model with me, but you've got one in the palm of your hands, and we'll look at that and how we can describe the brain and understand the processes that the brain goes through when we're learning. And then finally go deeper, look at the neural connections and what does it look like microscopically, and how do we fertilize that soil. All right, so let's go to the next slide, and I want to share a quote with you that I just absolutely love. And I read it many, many years ago. Antonio Damasio said, when we raise our level of consciousness of self, we improve the art of life. Just like me thinking I'm feeling grateful or I'm feeling tickled, I'm being more conscious of who I am. But even more importantly, the social health is when we raise our level of consciousness of others, we improve the art of living. If I go home and I'm a grouchy dad, or I'm a grouchy principal, and I become conscious of that and recognize, hey, Mr. B, you're being grouchy, then I'm going to put a timeout in my brain. I'm going to say, all right, put that aside. Yes, you might be grouchy, but that doesn't mean you have to be mean. That doesn't mean you have to be short. That doesn't mean you can't listen to people. So it's that consciousness of self and others that allows us to navigate the daily life with our emotions, with those things that could potentially cause a lot of distress. Thank you. Let's go to the next idea, and that is kind of the why we are parents and educators, or what does that really mean? And for far too long, the word educate, in my opinion, has been flipped upside down. And we believe that education is about filling in a child's brain. But in fact, if we go back to the root word educate, comes from the Latin root educare, or to draw out, to nurture. And the actual word parenting is the same thing. It's a synonymous word. They mean the same thing, to nurture, to grow, to foster. It's not to put in, it's to draw out. So we have to understand the brain. We have to understand who we're teaching. We teach children, not subjects. So we have to understand that person, understand what's going on in their brain, so that we can truly educate and draw out the better or best version of our kids. So there has been so much work. I don't know if you're an ASCD subscriber, but back in October they published the educational journal, and it was solely on social emotional learning. The next book they put out, Engage the Brain, How to Design for Learning That Taps into the Power of Emotion. And just this week, and I can't believe this happened, but there we go again. And I love the title, All Learning is Social Emotional. All learning is social emotional. It starts here in our heart and in our limbic system, and then it moves to the academic. So if we're going to have student achievement, we have to focus. We have to put some time and energy into what's going on in a child's heart. And the analysis out there is huge. All of the meta-analysis studies have showed that there's the attitude towards self and others improves, that social behavior and conduct improves, emotional distress decreases, academic performance goes from 11 to 13-point gains when we use social emotional strategies to improve learning. I'm going to flip a little bit and go into a model that we put together here at the school to help us navigate learning. And we call it the Formation of Learning Framework. It comes from many, many, many years of study and theorists, and it's all kind of combined into one. We're talking about maybe doing another webinar on this model itself. But for today's purposes, I want to help us understand that learning process before I actually look at the brain. I believe more than ever that in education, we're hearing it all the time, that the primary goal for us to educate, to draw out the best version of our students is to help them be creative. That's the target, to help them be great thinkers, problem solvers, decision makers, investigators, inventors, experimenters, that they are creative with their mind and they get to that highest level of learning. That's where we get 90% retention of knowledge and skills, when the kids are creative. To get there, we have to acquire knowledge and develop reasoning skills in order to get to be creative. But what underlies that more than anything, the foundation to learning, is a child's disposition, a child's attitude and perception about who they are as a learner. So this is the foundation. We can't do the rest of it well unless we have laid this foundation. Again, the purpose of social emotional learning strategies, be that at home, working with a pre-K kid, or a high school student. And for that matter, I've had the pleasure of working with graduate students and starting a lesson in a college class with some social emotional strategies. So these 5 elements, you see 4 here, but there's a 5th one on the side. It's the black line, and I'll go into that real quickly. So I'm going to address these 5 components. I'll describe them just to give us a quick understanding. So I actually hit this one already in terms of creativity. Sorry, it's upside down. That's decision making and problem solving, invention, investigation, experimentation, and systems analysis. So it's that highest level of thinking that we want kids to get to, but not just thinking, actually producing something as a service or a product. Just below that is a student's ability to do reasoning skills, for them to reason with the knowledge that they've gained by extending and refining knowledge, by comparing, by classifying, by analyzing perspectives of other people or other ideas. It's error analysis. What went wrong? Why didn't it work? When we get kids to that level of thinking, there's a 50% retention. Not bad, but not as good as the 90. When we just focus on knowledge and we use a very textbook-driven approach and memorization approach and testing approach, and we just do this, and I know for any of you who have had college classes, you think back, the times that you've crammed for a test. Wow, 2 weeks later, how much do we remember? The research tells us that we only remember 10%. So after 2 weeks, the retention level of just knowledge is only 10%. And moms and dads, we've told our kids 100 times, well, if we just got them to try to memorize it, not reason with it, or not do something with it, then the retention level is really low. But to even get to that retention level, we have to work on their disposition. We have to work on their personal attitude and perception about learning and who they are as a learner. How are they smart? Not how smart they are, but how are they smart? Help me to understand who I am. Help me to understand my peers. Because when I have intelligence with that, when I am socially, emotionally intelligent, I'm smart, I'm capable, I'm confident. My favorite word is efficacy. I have efficacy, I'm efficacious. I really am capable and confident about learning. So this is the bottom line. This is the base. If we build this well, all of those numbers, academic achievement, all of the negative things that can happen, all of that stuff gets better. So that's why social emotional learning is such a powerful topic right now. It's big in our industry for good reason, and I'm really glad. I'm really happy that it is. Looking at Eric Jensen's work with the brain and understanding the brain-based learning, Dweck's work with the growth mindset. All of those theorists and researchers and writers are telling us we need to help kids to understand how they are smart, not how smart they are. All right, so let's look now at some of the structures of the brain and how those essentially these primary structures work. Now, I showed you I had a nice little model, which is kind of cool. If you can ever get your hands on one, kids love it because they can take it apart and they can examine it and look at the different parts. But truly, in the palm of our hand, we have a model of our brain. So I'm going to ask you to participate with me. I always tell my students, learning is something we do. It's not something that happens to us. So if you're out there and you're watching, I expect that your right hand is up and your thumb is in and your fingers are over. So again, right hand up, thumb in, fingers over. This little model has been illustrated by many authors lately. My favorite one is Tina Payne Bryson and the work that she's done on the whole brain child. But it's a real simple thing you can teach preschoolers all the way through adulthood. And, all right, so here we go. This model represents the three primary components of the brain. We'll look at our wrist as the brain stem, our thumb as the limbic system, or the midbrain, and our fingers as the cerebrum. So let me do this again. Our wrist equals the brainstem. What goes on here? Survival mode. Am I safe? Am I hungry? Am I loved? Or not, actually not loved, love goes here. Am I hungry, thirsty, comfortable, tired? When a child walks in, I was working with a young boy this morning, not fed. He's cranky and he's upset. He's sad for a lot of reasons, but a lot of it has to do with his social emotional, or excuse me, his socioeconomic status. So this is survival brain. This is where we think first. If this is happy and this is strong, good. And then I can move to this part of my brain, which is the limbic system of our brain. It's the emotional part of our brain. And the question is, am I loved? Do I feel good? Am I socially accepted by my peers and by my teachers? So again, I'm surviving. Oh, I feel loved. Now I can do some thinking. Now I can use cognition. I can use thinking power in order to wrangle my day, in order to deal with the episodes of my day. And there are 4 lobes in our brain, which is kind of cool, and I'll rattle them off, but no need to remember unless you're really interested. But the back of our brain is our occipital lobe, and then the top of our brain is our parietal lobe. The side of our brain is the temporal lobe, and the front of our brain is the frontal lobe. And each of those have general functions as well, but the primary one is that frontal lobe. That's where we do our logic and reasoning. But we can do it as well with all of those lobes because that's our long-term memory. That's our executive functioning. This is where we're storing understanding and memory and knowledge and reasoning. So as I go through the brain, get to the emotional system, if I can get a child to connect with their emotional system by wrangling it with the rest of their brain, they won't flip their lid. They won't have that reactive behavior. They're going to be thinkers. They're going to recognize what they're doing and try to hug their brain. So for a kindergartner or any younger student, we teach them these basic functions. And then there are times all I have to do is this. And they'll recognize, okay, I need to think and come up with use a strategy to hug my brain. So those are the 3 main parts of the brain. And if I'm thinking and causing and helping children to cause that thinking, they will be less reactive and more active. They will be less emotional and more cognitive. Got it good? So those are the 3 parts of the brain: brainstem, limbic system, and cerebrum. Survival, emotional, thinking. That's as simple as I think we can make it, and it's so powerful and helpful to teach this to children and to use it ourselves when we're emotional and we need to do some thinking. You just did it earlier when I asked you how you were feeling. All right, let's go to the next thought and look at 3 different applications of this idea on the 3 parts of the brain. So number 1 is to be a mirror. I don't know how I look to you today, but I feel pretty happy. But I'm mirroring something, and how I mirror that is going to cause you to think and feel a certain way. So as a dad or as a teacher or as a principal, my personal disposition is going to be mirrored to a child. It's huge how we do that. So the first step to activating a child's brain is your mirror, is you being a mirror to the child. we have to check ourselves. We have to be calm and peaceful. If we aren't calm and peaceful, then we're letting them stay here. Maybe it's in survival mode. If they think we're really mad at them, they're staying in survival mode. They're not safe. If we're not acknowledging their feelings or trying to be empathetic, oh my gosh, that must really have hurt, then they're going to stay in the limbic system and not do the cognition. I like this simple phrase that's on the next line, and may not be appropriate in all venues, but it was said to me by one of my college professors when I was going through a credential program. And he said, you want your kids to call you 3 F words. I said, what? What do you mean by that? Firm, fair, and friendly. And if we can practice those 3 traits, to be firm, fair, and friendly, we are going to change our disposition, and we will be much more effective working with children and our colleagues and our spouse and our own children. So how do we do that? We get down at their level. You look at them eye to eye. If they're short, get down to their level. Get on your knee. I have laid on the floor with kids and just been able to get to their eye level, so I can look at them and smile and try to get an emotional reaction that will cause them to start thinking. Again, our relaxed and open disposition, our posture, that's not going to work. That's going to cause defensiveness and get the child to push away. So our personal disposition, eyes, posture, I forget where the study came from, but what, 97%, 95% of what we say is not our words. It's our body posture. It's our tone of voice. It's all of those things that we see and feel when we're talking to somebody. So monitor your voice and your facial expressions. Monitor those things that are going to cause a really positive mirror to the child. Be peaceful and accepting of their emotional state despite what it is. 99 times out of 100, the problem that the child's walking in with, whether you're at home or school, doesn't have to do with you. It has to do with something that's going on with them emotionally, socially, physically. And our job is to try to understand that, get them to recognize that, and then get them to do the thinking so that they can solve their problem. So that's number 1. Be a mirror to your child. Number 2, this is one of our favorites here at Almond Acres, and it comes from Ellen Dodge. She calls it the Kimochis, but the simplest way or the thing I want us to remember is the simple phrase, name it to tame it. If I have a feeling and I've named it, the fact that I've named it has caused my cerebrum to work. The fact that I have that I said I was cranky, that I feel overwhelmed, all of a sudden I've changed the anxiety level and brought it to the cerebrum and allowed myself to think. And once I'm thinking, then I can problem solve, make good decisions, investigate, etc. So naming it to taming it is a simple way for us to remember and to say to a child, hey, name it so we can tame it, or name it so we can tame it. She has some really cool things. You see some Kimochi pictures on the screen, but every one of the kids at the school have this page in their binder. Every classroom has it as a poster. I have it hanging here in my office. And when a child comes in and there's a situation, instead of confronting the situation right away and trying to wrangle the thoughts, get their feeling. How are you feeling? I'll just do a little random selection here. Do you feel left out? That one happened yesterday. And they got 3 girls together. We sat on the floor and we talked about how they felt left out there on the playground. And once they talked about it and they named it, they really started to tame it, because they started to do the error analysis or the analyzing perspectives and got smart about the relationships and what they wanted. So this is a pretty cool tool. She does another deal with it, and I use it in counseling often. So these are Kimochi pillows. And again, I'm not trying to sell these. I'm just trying to give you an example of how we can help kids wrangle their feelings in that limbic system. But they're labeled on the back side. Oops, this one says he feels guilty. But there's happy. And we can talk to kids about taking a positive feeling, maybe happy and silly, and taking that mad feeling and hugging it. and physically feeling that sensation of, you know what, I'm going to wrangle this. I'm going to hold on to it. I'm going to hug my feelings. And so anyway, that's a fantastic tool that comes from Ellen Dodge and the Kimochis. And like it says there, it's very kinesthetic. Let's look at number 3. Number 3, get a grip on the thinking brain. So that's what we mean here. We're getting a grip on it. So I talked about these being the 4 lobes of the brain, which they are. But for me as a counselor, teacher, administrator, I like to think about it as the 4 elements of the human person: heart, mind, body, and soul. The heart equals my interpersonal intelligence and naturalist intelligence. The body equals my kinesthetic and visual intelligence. The mind equals my linguistic and logical mathematical intelligence. And the soul equals my musical and intrapersonal intelligence. So don't mean to go into that too far. We'll do that in the next webinar as I talk about intelligences. But those 4 areas of our life, heart, mind, body, and soul, can give us the tools we need to hug those emotions if they're going out of whack. So I can talk to people. I can take a deep breath or take a walk or eat something if I'm hungry and cranky. I can use words. I can write a letter or draw a picture, and I can listen to music. So those ideas of using your heart, mind, body, and soul can do that for you. The other simple way to do it is the questions that are listed there. The heart is who? Who can help me? The mind is what and when? What else could I do? When could I do it? Maybe I should write it down. The body, where and how could I do that differently? The how, I need to breathe. And the soul, why? Why do I feel this way? Let me understand. So that's using your brain. That's cognition. And when we recognize our problem and we use cognition, we wrangle it, we hug it, we recognize the problem, and we use our brain to fix it. So there is a simple way, getting a grip on the thinking brain. Again, using that physical way to do it is very helpful. All right, let's go deeper. Let's look at the neuron and what's going on specifically or microscopically in the brain. And I have a favorite tool that I like to use to teach it. So let me get this out here. And it's made with pipe cleaners and yarn. And these are awesome tools to express the structure of a neuron. So we're going to demonstrate that. So we saw the 3 parts of the brain. Now let's look at it microscopically. This is a cool one, kind of a dreadlock one. But this is a neuron, if you will. We have 100 billion neurons in our head. 100 billion. 100 billion little chunks of energy and chemistry to create thought, to create feeling, to create cognition. Now imagine those 100 billion neurons being able to connect to up to 10,000 other neurons. It's a huge number of connections, unfathomable. One theorist said that there's more connections in the brain, can be made than there are atoms in the universe. I don't know if that's totally true, but it's unfathomable the number of connections we can make. Just do the math. So the parts of the brain include, well, let me show you how I did it. So we made a little popsicle stick out of the pipe cleaner, and then we took pieces of yarn and we tied those on to the cell body of the neuron. We wrap it around one end, and we create a few dangling little pieces of yarn at the end. Those are our synapses. So that's essentially how these are constructed. Kids can construct them and learn these parts of the brain pretty quickly. Looking at the anatomy of that, what does that really mean, or what are they? So we talked about the cell body, where everything is kind of grown, the nerve is grown, or the neuron is grown. And then the dendrites, or the dreadlocks, the dendrites are these elements of the brain here that are hanging off of the cell body. And they are receptors and transmitters of neurotransmitters. The axon, which is this line here. And it's kind of cool because that axon has metal in it in this piece of pipe cleaner. And that metal or that axon represents the electrical impulse that's coming out of the cell body and off to the synaptic terminals and out to another neuron. So we have this electrical and chemical reaction going on. We have this little generator of chemistry and electronics. And when it gets excited, it wants to share. It wants to tell two friends. So it jumps, and it jumps off of that synapse, and it jumps to another neuron. But it has to get excited. It has to have a disposition that it wants to share, that it wants to learn. So we're creating that by fertilizing these with good, productive, healthy habits, with encouragement, by mirroring, etc. There's one other way to illustrate that if you don't have the yarn, and you can use your arm. Again, back to the brain, we can show a neuron, cell body, dendrites, axon is my bone, muscle is the myelin sheath, which is the chemical transmission, the neurotransmitters being stored and being produced here or sent through here. And then at my elbow, I have synaptic terminals. And kids can go around and connect to show the illustration of making connections in their brain through that synaptic process. Now, one other thought there is you can create the synaptic process by rubbing your feet on the ground, and you know what happens if you go to touch somebody, it shocks. Well, that's the electrical impulse jumping out, but you don't touch the person, and that's what happens in the synapse too. It jumps because it's so excited. Next couple of slides will show us some pictures and so a list. So we've got a picture of a group of neurons all connecting and working together to create a neural pathway. A thought, a memory, an understanding is a neural pathway. It's a collection of neurons. So if I look at this yarn again as a neural pathway, I can actually pull a fiber out of that and pretend that's a neuron, not tied to anything, but connected to each other. And neurons, when I continue to think something and I learn something, then it gets stronger. And if I associate it to something else, it gets even stronger. Do it again, it even gets stronger. And then let kids be creative with it. And now we've created a very cool neural pathway, a very strong understanding about something, whether it's social or academic. And that's super strong and it's cool. So that's what's going on in the brain with neurons. They're grown to be healthy or not, and they relate and associate with each other. The next slide shows us the neural pathways, or excuse me, neurotransmitters and the host of neurotransmitters that are causing emotions, that are causing different emotional effects on our body. I'm not going to go into those right now, but that's a cool little list to understand. Last night I took a little bit of melatonin to help me sleep and calm down. So different transmitters are going to have different effects on our body. Next slide is a quote that I think summarizes things really well for us too. I'm going to take a deep breath here though. How are we feeling out there? Let's get a check on our emotions. Okay, good, I feel better now. So this is a quote that I don't know if actually Emerson wrote it or Stephen Covey or Smiles, or is it really a Chinese proverb? I like to think it's an old farmer who wrote this and said, when we sow a thought, when we sow seeds, we sow a thought, we reap an act. We think about something enough, we create a neural pathway. That neural pathway can become an action in our life. When we do it enough, we habituate it, we create a habit. Our habits define or create our character, and our character creates our destiny. So what we're doing, whether it's academically or social emotionally, both, we are sowing thoughts. We're helping kids to remember, to put things back together again, to recognize, to recognize an idea and become smarter. So it's our job to create the habituation, to create the habit in their brain by doing things over and over again. Yes, moms and dads, you have to say it over and over again. But guess what? You get at least 18 years to do that. So remind yourself that patient persistence when you're teaching your children, we just can't stop. We have to keep teaching these things in a kind, gentle way for kids to deal with those challenging emotions. So whether that was I mean, you could look at that as a seamstress too, right? A sewer, somebody who sews. So last thought here about the neuron and what that means. Got a couple of models for us here. I can go full screen. When we don't fertilize well, this is essentially what it can look like. And if you look at some of the graphics or pictures of microscopic pictures of neurons, if we don't do it well, they deteriorate. They get brittle. They prune. If there's not good oxygen and they're not fertilized with water and nutrition, a neuron can get ugly, and that's a toxic neuron. If you're curious about this kind of thinking, look up Dr. Caroline Leaf. She's done a wonderful job explaining what happens to neurons and how they get brittle and how they shrink and get small. My daughter made a little one for me yesterday. It's not as healthy. It's just smaller, shrinks, and it doesn't have the dendrite connections. But a healthy one, when fertilized well, that's what we get. We get beautiful growth and we get fruit. So which neuron should we grow? That's a pretty easy answer. All right, moving forward, keep an eye on my time here. Let's look at 3 applications on how we can grow neurons. Number 1 is don't rob Eureka. Don't steal away opportunities for your kids to think. Let them do the thinking. Learning is something we do. It's not something that happens to us. So teach your children to do the thinking themselves. Let them have that, oh, wow, I get it. That's Eureka. Don't rob Eureka. At a microscopic level, that electrical impulse and chemical reaction is Eureka. Don't rob it. So there's your first thought, first quote to stuff in your head somewhere. The next one is similar, many questions with few answers. We cause connection with questions. We don't cause connection always with answers. We cause it with questions. How do you feel? Wow, now I get it. I feel cranky. I feel left out. That's causing cognition. Create a story. This is actually touted as one of the strongest learning strategies, is using stories to help kids understand the whole thing that's going on socially, emotionally. But the next step to it is to teach the sequel. So what should it look like next? Here's your story. What would you like it to look like next? And that's taking it to decision making and problem solving. So use questions, few answers, to get kids to do the connecting. Nurture positive and productive healthy habits. Healthy habits of mind need to be talked about constantly. Having a habit of the week, using the 7 habits of highly effective people, using Art Costa and Ben Acalek's 36 different habits of mind. All of those habits need to be said explicitly. We can't assume that kids understand what a habit is or what that thinking trait is. We have to say them explicitly and teach them directly to create healthy fertilization. We're fertilizing that soil. We're fertilizing the roots of those neurons. Let's see. And then you could also think about that heart, mind, body, and soul. We're trying to create healthy habits with each of those areas. Good. Let's go on to the next one. And the final one for neurons is school-wide systems. And I mentioned one of these already. Our school-wide systems include some of these things, but a shared start. So every morning our entire school gets together, K through 8, and we talk about the habit of the week. We celebrate students for all kinds of intelligences. So that habit of the week is shared every single day by students, by staff, and illustrated in one way or another. This week, the habit of the week was from Covey, and it's seek. We have a hand signal. Seek first to understand, and then to be understood. Pretty appropriate for this topic too. But seeking first to understand, then be understood is the habit of the week. So the 2nd grade class did a cute little dramatization, about a 3-minute little drama on stage to show us what that meant to them. So once we've left shared start, we do a morning meeting. Now, I think morning meetings can be done. I do it. I have a 45-minute drive to work every day. I do a morning meeting with my daughter as we're driving to school. And we're talking about how does she feel today? How did she feel about what happened yesterday, and what's her story going to look like today? So that morning meeting in the classroom, take 10 minutes out of your time to check on their emotional state, to check on their disposition, so that you know where your students are. Yesterday, a student was really out of whack, and come to find out that he found out the night before that his parents were getting a divorce. So where do you think his disposition is to learn? It's down here. It's in survival mode. You know, who am I going to live with? He's not going to get to here unless we address it with him and get him to make the connection. So morning meetings are pretty darn powerful. And then maybe using the Komochi system to, give one of these to every child and have them have that at their seat so they can express, if they choose to, how they feel that day. Post it, give it to your parents. Send that habit of the week out to your parents so it can be reiterated at home. That's one of my favorite things about Parent Square. I send a weekly post every Monday, and parents are hearing about the habit of the week, how we're addressing it in our school, heart, mind, body, and soul, and how they can address that and teach that at home, heart, mind, body, and soul. I'll show you a link at the end, or a picture of our post at the end of the webinar today. And then finally, I'm going to check my time here. Ooh, running out. Fix-it system. I'm going to save that for next time. But FIX, forgive, identify your consequences, and what are you going to do next time? That's the fix-it system. Okay, let's go to, oh good, we are pretty close. The key takeaways today. I want to give enough time for some questions, but the three key takeaways for us are growing. We're growing children. We're growing neurons. If we're going to grow great kids, our job is to fertilize. They exist. They have an innate intelligence, a personality. We have to fertilize that so we get the best version of that child. Educate means to educe, to draw out, not to fill in. The second topic that we talked about are the three basics of the brain: survival mode, emotional mode, and cognition. And understanding, we kind of have to go through that process to get to here if we're going to be smart. This is being smart. And then finally, the neurons and neural connections, and fertilizing those babies with healthy habits. And creating habits means we have to talk about it often. We don't learn things once, twice, or even 3 times. It takes 3 to 20 times to learn anything. If I introduce myself to you, I'll almost guarantee most people won't remember my name 5 minutes later, unless they said it at least 3 times. So it takes the habituation process to make us smart and reflective and understanding. All right, I think I covered it all. Oh, last thing I want to share with you. I know we've got parents and administrators out there, so some of my favorite books as a parent, I'd say the first one that I truly loved about the brain was Why Do They Act That Way? This is from Dr. David Walsh, and it's a guide to the adolescent brain. Really great stuff, beautifully written. He's also a dad, and he's worked in education. I mentioned Tina Payne Bryson and Dr. Siegel. So The Whole Brain Child, beautiful, simple read, really great work. Tina has 3 boys of her own. I mentioned, I didn't mention him, but John Medina, The Brain Rules. He's got one for preschoolers. He's got this one. He also has one for us old folks, that talking about how do we nurture the brain of older folks. And for school folks, I showed you a couple of the works from ASCD, but Antonio Damasio, The Feeling of What Happens is powerful. John Hattie's Visible Learning tells us, those strategies that are most effective. If you look at that list of strategies, the top ones are directly related to social emotional health. So there's a few references for you to do a little extra reading this weekend. We have maybe a 3-day weekend. So thanks everybody, I sure appreciate it. I'm going to tell you now what we're going to do next. So in our next seminar, I think around March 22nd, I want to go deeper into the uniqueness of each learner. So we know what generally the brain looks like and how it works, but what about that unique person? What about their personal temperament, their intelligences, their personality, and how they learn? So I call it identifying your learner in different ways, and I have a variety of tools to share with you there. They're very cool tools. Kids love them, parents love them. So I hope you join me again in our next episode of Growing Great Kids. I'll turn it back to you, Lynn.
Bob, you are amazing. Thank you. I am learning constantly from you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to everyone else, all of you, educators and parents, for first of all, for being here, spending an hour with us, but also for giving so much every day to help your youth grow to the best version of themselves. The work that you do is so incredible, and here at Parent Square, we are extremely thankful for all that you do. And yes, we look forward to have everyone join again in what we think is going to be March 22nd. We'll give you information about the details around that, but that's going to be part 2 of our webinar series, Growing Great Kids, where we'll be discussing developing a disposition to learn. And I really can't wait to hear how we identify our learners. They're also different, and how do they best take in information? What is their personality? What is their temperament? Their different intelligence. It makes so much sense that once this has been identified, that's when we can change their emotional states to be good, happy, successful learners. So super exciting. We've gotten questions coming in. We have questions about the Komochis, the slide deck, books. We'll be sending out lists on all of that. And one other thing, which is great to know, some questions have been related to Parent Square, and Bob is going to share a little bit about his habit of the week. There was actually a question, Sandy sent a question, where do you get these ideas from for the shared habit of the week? So Bob, do you want to address that really quick?
That's real simple. Over the past 7 years of our school, we've developed these habits and determined which habit we ought to teach each week, and they are in a sequential order. Be happy to share it with you. But they start with character counts. The character counts traits: trustworthy, respectful, responsible, fair, and caring. Makes you terrific, TRFC, without the vowels. That equals citizenship. So we use that set, and we use the 7 habits of highly effective people. Begin with the end in mind, be proactive, seek first to understand, then be understood. That set of habits, that's a beautiful, and Franklin Covey did a really nice job in writing a book just for teens, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. So there's actually a curriculum for it. The Leader in Me system by Franklin Covey has helped us with that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Art Costa and Ben Akalik, and I think it's 36 different habits, intellectual and personal character traits that they address, from finding humor to interdependence to restraining impulsivity. Those are individual habits that can be taught. The language can become shared between the home and the school. Super set of habits, and I'm happy to share our list with you if you'd like.
There's another, thank you, Bob. There's another question. If you can recommend any SEL curriculum for high school students?
Okay, I would jump on the Leader in Me. I think it's one of the most powerful, those 7 habits. We've taught them to adults for years. Stephen Covey made millions going around to Fortune 500 companies. And toward the end of his life, he recognized that, why didn't we teach these to children? Why didn't we teach them in high schools or colleges? We ended up spending a lot of money trying to help adults. So the 7 habits of highly effective people, the Leader in Me system, is actually a CASEL approved social emotional learning curriculum. So that's the one we've adopted. Prior to that, we had developed our own system using Ellen Dodge's work with the Komochis, and she's got a whole host of tools there. But those are 2 that I think are very good.
That's great, thank you. Some of the questions that are coming in are also related to Parent Square. So just a quick, really short intro for those that may have missed it in the beginning. So Parent Square helps schools and districts unify and streamline all school tone communication into one simple platform. And we want to ensure that we can help you bring that parent engagement component into the mix. So outside of being able to reach classroom-based, grade level-based, school-wide based, district-wide announcements, we bring in other things like sign-ups, polls, volunteering, conferencing. We bring other things online like payments and permission slips. And it's just to create the convenience and the consistency of the communication, so parents don't run into information fatigue, as we like to call it. I know Bob has been using Parent Square for many, many years now, and the information that gets sent to families will be available via a portal. They can receive app notifications, text messages. We do language translation for you. We also have an urgent call, kind of a robo notification available as well. And we know how important parent engagement is to social emotional learning. And that's why we've made ParentScore an interactive tool between school and home. And we know that your kids, yeah, go ahead, Bob. I love your interruptions here.
Okay.
I do. You can describe this, how you like, how you use it on a day-to-day basis.
In about 35 minutes, we're going to have a fire drill, an emergency drill. So one of the things I do after every one of those drills is within 15 minutes, the parents get a notification that we just had the drill. And I might mention, obviously, what kind of a drill it is, but how the kids did, and a piece of information or a link that they can use to prepare their kids at home. They absolutely so appreciate that they know that we're practicing emergency drills and that we as a school are communicating directly with the home. And that just goes to our parents through ParentScore. So it just allows a very personalized approach to create that communication relationship between you and your parents.
We borrowed this from your, well, you knew we borrowed this, but I know it's not just you using ParentScore, so maybe you want to address a little bit of, to this post as well.
Yeah, I don't know how many posts we do a day, but understand too that your posts are directed to a particular audience. So if you're a first grade teacher, it's only going to your first grade families. If you're the athletic director and you're posting to the athletes of the week for those games, then it's just going to those people. So not everybody's getting everything, which is wonderful because, like she said, we can be bombarded with too much. You can have your parents sign up and support you, and now they see where the participation is in the classroom. They see who's helping, who's not. Creates a little more accountability too between us. And again, it's just this constant stream of communication. Parents can get it every time it comes out, each post, or they can get a digest of it at the end of the week or the end of the day. So they can choose how they want to get this information. But when we talk about social emotional learning, this is creating the social interaction between the school and the home. It creates that constant communication so there isn't confusion and derision. There's unification to our effort and our goal to grow great kids. We're working together and parents are informed. So it's been a super powerful platform for us. I didn't realize how powerful it would be until, we're 7 years now into it. And we wouldn't live without it.
Thank you, Bob. And if anyone wants to learn more about ParentScore, you can check out our website or social media. We have a lot of information on our blog. And again, we'll be sending you the slide deck to this webinar. We also will be sending out the recording. We'll let you know where you can get the books and the little, what do you call them, kimochis?
Mochi.
Yeah. If you have any questions for Bob, feel free to email me. So lynn@parentscore.com, and I'll make sure they get to him. I know there's more questions that are coming in. We've taken up almost the entire hour. I don't know. Do we have time for another question, Bob?
Certainly. Yeah. I'm good. I've got 11:30 drill.
All right. So, for example, how can we use technology in more social and emotional ways? Is one of the questions that may relate a little bit to ParentScore and what we just discussed.
I'm sorry. Would you repeat the question? I didn't catch
it. How can we use technology in more social and emotional ways?
Okay. Well, that's a double-edged sword, isn't it? The social media has really caused a lot of distress out there. I'm just going to go to my brain on something that happened yesterday or this week. There was a negative post toward a parent on social media. It wasn't on our platform. It was on Facebook. And one of our parents challenged that person to think win-win. So they took the habit that we've been practicing and put it out there and said, how could you turn that into a think win-win instead of a think win-lose? They're asking questions. Hey, help me understand what's going on. It causes us to seek first to understand and then be understood. So we can use the habits to cause people, again, asking questions instead of giving answers and opinions. Just ask questions and use the media devices to promote this kind of thinking. Whether you're on Instagram or Facebook or even your parents' Twitter, you're going to see comments in there. And you can ask people positive, productive questions that will get them to recognize, and I'll say it again differently, recognize and get it to the frontal lobe and not be down here in the limbic system. So we can use the platforms to get people to think in a way that's much more productive than the drama that we see. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great answer. Another one that we actually get a lot here at Parent Square when they have students with different native language, or families really with different native language. There's a person that work at a language immersion program where students and teacher have different native languages. Do you, Bob, have any suggestions for social emotional learning in a second language?
Well, number one, I'll kind of go back to how we've done it here. We have a population of Hispanic learners, English language learners, and we let Parent Square translate the messages. So we're able to communicate all of our posts through the second language. And I'm not sure all of the languages that are available. Maybe Lynn, you could address that. But getting the same information that you're trying to teach English learner or English speakers to non-English speakers, this tool makes it simple. All I have to do is hit translate, and any of my messages go through that. My administrative assistant, she is a beautiful Spanish speaker, and she reads through it to make sure that it's clear. But so far, it's been really, really good. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and thank you. And about Parent Square and the language translation, we can indeed translate just about any language out there.
One more thought.
Yeah, we integrate with a school student information system. So if you have the preferred language flagged in your SIS, we can pull that field into Parent Square and ensure that information gets sent that way.
Okay. These things have nothing to do with language. These images, these illustrations, these concepts are not language barriers. Anybody and everybody can understand these. So it's not restricted to using a language when you have a prop or a model to help you do it. So that's another way we can teach social emotional learning in the palm of our hand.
Great, thank you, Bob. And we are top of the hour again, just an hour later. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Bob, so much. Again, from all of us here at Parent Square, we really appreciate you and all the wonderful work that you do.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Very well, everyone. Enjoy your 3-day weekend.